This is the story of a complicated relationship involving cars, rare earths, 5G technology, and human rights. Germany and China's economies are heavily intertwined. They need each other, but in some ways, they really wish they didn't. In recent weeks, big-name German companies, Volkswagen and BASF, have been in hot water. They've been called out for their activities in Xinjiang, an autonomous region in northwest China home to around 12 million Uyghurs, an ethnic group that suffered suppression by the Chinese government. Volkswagen's Chinese joint venture partner there, SAIC, is accused of using forced labor at a production facility in Urumqi and for the construction of a test track in Turpan. VW says it's found no evidence of abuse at Urumqi, but that it's yet to conduct an audit of the test track. Still, it is reassessing its relationship with SAIC. BASF, meanwhile, has been called out for alleged abuses by its Chinese partner Markor, based in Korla. Markor's staff are accused of spying on Uyghurs. BASF was already in the process of selling its shares in Markor because of concerns around the use of coal, but the reports about human rights abuses have sped up the process. These moves make headlines, but they're only a drop in the ocean in the context of Germany's total investment in China. China is Germany's most important trading partner, with the two countries exchanging more than 253 billion euros in goods in 2023. The Chinese market is especially important for Germany's core industries, with cars, car parts, circuitry, and measurement tools among the most important exports. In the past 3 decades, trade between the two countries has ballooned, albeit with a slight dip last year as Chinese demand slowed. It's no secret that Germany and China are based on very different ideologies. Germany is a democracy, China's an autocracy. Germany traditionally put its faith into the free market, whereas China's economy has been heavily state-controlled. So how did we get to the point of these two radically different economies becoming so deeply connected? Let's go back a few decades, to the early 70s, when West Germany established diplomatic ties with China. In 1975, then-Chancellor Helmut Schmidt visited Beijing. He travelled with a trade delegation, setting the stage for future German visits. Schmidt rightly predicted China was on course to becoming a major economic power. In the following years, German companies increasingly gained a foothold in China. In 1984, Volkswagen set up its first factory in Shanghai, partnering with China's SAIC, which we mentioned earlier when we talked about Xinjiang. In 1995, Chinese President Jiang Zemin visited Germany, signing a number of billion-dollar deals with German companies, including Mercedes and Siemens. Throughout the 2000s, both Chancellor Gerhard Schröder and Angela Merkel continued to foster business ties. By 2016, the country had become Germany's most important trade partner. In those years, Germany's desired relationship with China could be summed up by the phrase Wandel durch Handel. It's catchier in German than in English, but it roughly translates to change through trade. The idea was simple. The more you traded with a country, the more open and democratic it would become. Germany followed the same logic with Russia, with poor results. Putin's invasion of Ukraine catapulted Germany into an energy crisis as it was suddenly forced to reduce its large dependence on Russian gas. That experience and growing concerns about China's intentions towards democratic Taiwan gave Germany some food for thought. Had it also become too reliant on Beijing? In some areas, it's hard to dispute. Rare earths are a good example. They're the materials that go into everything from smartphones to medical equipment to wind turbines. Here, Germany depends overwhelmingly on imports from Beijing. According to a survey by Germany's Bundesbank, almost half of German manufacturers rely either directly or indirectly on critical materials from China. Then there's technology. Chinese company Huawei is a leader in 5G. That's the super high-speed, highly reactive broadband that countries all over the world are busy rolling out. But as this report points out, Huawei accounts for 59% of Germany's core 5G network, giving it a greater market share in Berlin than it does in Beijing, and prompting concerns about a potential risk to Germany's national security. Another contentious Chinese company is TikTok. Last year, the European Parliament banned staff from using the app on corporate devices, citing cybersecurity risks. And just this week, in fact, the European Commission launched an investigation into advertising transparency and data access at its parent ByteDance. Another uncomfortable truth for export-driven Germany: is its heavy reliance on the Chinese market. This one especially applies to the car industry. Once upon a time, it dominated China, partnering with local companies to produce and sell there. Those times? Well, they're over. Last year, Chinese electric car maker BYD overtook Volkswagen as the #1 brand in China. Years of Chinese government support for developing the electric market, combined with German car makers being asleep at the wheel, mean a core part of the German economy now faces an uphill battle. Chinese companies, once accused of unfairly benefiting from foreign know-how, they're increasingly themselves in the driving seat, no longer relying on the experience of their foreign counterparts. All of this, combined with the supply chain disruption caused by the pandemic, has got policymakers pretty worried. And it's led to a whole lot of talk about de-risking and decoupling. Now, getting anybody to pin down exactly what these two terms mean is quite a challenge. But broadly speaking, the aim is to reduce reliance on China by diversifying supply chains. And that brings us to where we are today. In the summer of 2023, the German government published its first ever official China strategy. The 64-page document on China isn't exactly diplomatic. It accuses Beijing of human rights violations in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong. It accuses authorities of economic espionage and of creating economic and technological dependencies in pursuit of its own political interests. But when it comes to what to actually do about this, the details are scanty. German companies are urged to be more aware of the risks and not to expect the government to bail them out in the event of a geopolitical crisis. It's not exactly a plea for radical action, and that is because Germany knows that the stakes of disentangling itself from the Chinese economy are high. Going back to the two companies we mentioned at the beginning of this video, that's enough to illustrate the point. BASF may be exiting Xinjiang, but it is certainly not pulling out of China. It continues to have a significant presence in the country, most recently announcing a €10 billion investment in a new plant in Guangdong. Volkswagen too is betting on expanding its already solid presence in China as it races to catch up on electric mobility. Economists have been debating just how big the impact of de-risking or decoupling would actually be. According to one model by the Kiel Research Institute, an abrupt halt in trade with China would cause the German economy to shrink by 5% in the first year, before continuing to decline at a slower pace. And there are already signs of change. In 2023, German companies invested record amounts in the United States, far more than in China. They were lured by the subsidies offered by the Inflation Reduction Act and the desire to diversify their manufacturing bases. For German policymakers, it's a fine line to tread. In the words of German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, China is at once a partner, competitor, and systemic rival. Partner, competitor, and systemic rival, all in one. It may not sound like the healthiest relationship, but it is one that's likely to endure for both their sakes.